Good evening, everyone. I am Utkarsh Punjabi, and welcome back to the Grass channel. Together, we make grass greater than chess. Okay, so today, this week, we'll actually cover two games that were played between the same two players, Vidit Gujrathi and Levon Aronian, in their round 3 and round 8 matchup of the FIDE Online Nations Cup. For those of you that are not familiar with this tournament, it took place very recently, and the 6 nations or 6 teams that participated in this event were Team India, Team USA, Team China, Team Russia, Team Europe, and Team Rest of the World. For Team India, the representatives were the great Vishwanathan Anand, Vidit Gujrathi, Pentala Hari Krishna, Adiban Bhaskaran. Between the 4 of them, they shared the top 3 boards. And the 2 ladies that represented Team India were Hampi Kaneru and Harika Dronavali. And between the 2 of them, they played on board 4. So India as a team, as all 4 of them did not have the best of tournaments. They finished second to last, and some of the individual performances weren't so great either. The person who received the most blame and the most criticism from fans as well as the chess community was unfortunately Vidit Gujrathi. For those of you that are not familiar, Vidit is the second best chess player in India. The only player who's obviously better than him is the 50-year-old Madras Tiger Vishwanathan Anand. So it is quite unfortunate that you have the second best chess player in India who is going up against all the super GMs, and he's receiving criticism after, and just absolute mean-spirited criticism, not even fair criticism from the fans as well as the chess community. Let's check out a couple of the articles that I read. The first article is titled, India Lose Again as Vidit Gujrathi Continues to Fumble. This article was, of course, it talks about how Vidit had a couple of winning positions and he ended up making a tactical error, or he just miscalculated. He played a slightly imprecise move and he went on to either draw or lose the game. And in some cases, especially in round 1, in their round 1 matchup, he had an absolutely drawn position. It was a complicated game. He was under time pressure, a lot of time pressure, but he ended up losing a drawn position. So a very tough loss. And again, Vidit himself acknowledges that, right? So in the second article, the title goes, Vidit Gujrathi says sorry to fans. China left Nations Cup. So China did end up winning the Nations Cup. And his quote directly from this article, quote, "It's a fact that I'm not much used to playing online events. That is not an excuse, though. I was in a winning position against Levon Aronian in the 3rd round versus Europe." So, of course, Levon is playing from Team Europe. "I lost that game. If I had won that game, things would have been different for me and the team. I could not recover after that. I was psychologically thrown off after that game. Whenever I played for India in the past, I had excellent results." So hopefully by covering the 2 games, and especially the one that he himself talks about, their round 3 matchup, I can provide some perspective and some feedback to the absolute mean-spirited criticism that Vidit has received. I have seen a couple of the YouTube videos that have analyzed their round 3 matchup, and I hate to say it, but all of the videos, all 3 videos that I've seen, they absolutely miss out on the beautiful complexity of the game, the deep preparation from both Levon and Vidit, and they unfortunately just end up going to this one last move where things went south, and it is just absolutely unfortunate. So hopefully I can do the Socratic justice, the true justice that both Levon and Vidit deserve throughout this game. Also, I don't want to do this just because I'm being a homer and I want to cramped up the second best chess player in India. Vidit is also a truly incredible person outside of chess, outside of just competing in tournaments. He was an integral part of the 2 charity events that took place very recently in fighting coronavirus and donating money to the needy, the people in need. The first event was Chess for Charity. It was on Samay Raina's YouTube channel. For those of you that don't know Samay Raina, he is one of the best comedians and he's an excellent YouTube streamer. So if you haven't checked out some of his stuff, I would most definitely recommend you do that. So he's very tight with Samay Raina. They're extremely close friends. So for the first event that they did, Chess for Charity, they ended up raising 8.3 lakh rupees. In the second charity event, they ended up raising 4.5 lakh rupees. If that's not enough, Vidit is also the brand ambassador for blind chess in India. If you don't know, blind chess is not promoted or has very little sponsorships in India. So the fact that this article is actually 2 years old, 1.5 years old, the fact that Vidit at the age of 23 was not only doing all of these incredible things outside of chess, but he was also being the brand ambassador for blind chess is truly incredible. So hopefully these 2 videos is not just about chess education or providing feedback to some of the critics, especially the mean-spirited critics, and it is also about just to support Vidit as a chess player from India, but also Vidit as a person, Vidit as a wonderful human being. So again, hopefully I can do the proper justice. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the game. Levon opens, so Levon has the white pieces and Vidit has the black pieces. I believe Levon is ranked 2773. That's his rapid rating, and Vidit's rapid rating is 2636. So he's spotting a lot of the GMs or super GMs playing on board 2, either 100 to 140 ELO points. And in chess, statistically speaking, the difference between 1100 to 1200 is very minute. It's very minimal statistically. But when you get to the GM or super GM level, the difference between a 2700 GM and a 2800 GM, it is a huge, huge statistical difference, right? As the saying goes, if you want to achieve perfection, you will most struggle not at the first 10% or first 25% or first 50%. It is towards the last 1% or last 2%. You will have to put in so much work just to go from 95% to say 98% versus going from say 70% to 80%, right? So there's a huge discrepancy between some of the players that Vidit is going up against, someone like Fabiano Caruana, the second best chess player in the world. And I believe his rating is probably 2800, if not more than 2800. So just keep that in mind. Also, throughout the game, I will mention where Vidit and Levon end up spending significant time, as I believe in the round 1 matchup, Vidit ended up making a crucial blunder, well, slight imprecise calculation because of the time difference. I think towards the end of the game, he had 20 seconds on the clock, and Fabi had, I believe, 6 minutes plus on the clock. So I will most definitely mention the time difference as we go along. So Levon goes with knight f3, and we have the Reti opening on the board. Vidit replies with d5, and the most common continuation here is either d4, g3, you want to fianchetto the bishop and go for this beautiful diagonal. But Levon goes for e3. So e3 is an extremely rare move, and we have that move as of move 2. So with it goes with c5. He wants to go ahead and gain the central control, the center control. The other idea could most obviously be knight to f6. So after c5, we have c4 striking in the center, and d4. So Vidit is not going for the gambit acceptance. Instead, he pushes the pawn. So we get e captures on d4, c captures on d4, and the most common continuation again is d3. After d3, you could most definitely again go for g3 and fianchetto the bishop this way, but instead, again, Levon throws another curveball on move 5, and he goes for bishop to d3. The idea behind bishop to d3, and you'll see throughout this game, is you want to develop your bishop to d3. After that, you want to go to c2, and finally you want to end up with your bishop on bishop to a4. You'll be targeting this diagonal, and especially you'll be putting a lot of pressure on the c6 square. This is a very known theory, and in some of the lines you'll actually end up exchanging most likely the knight that will come from knight to b8 to c6. So again, very known opening theory, but it is rarely played. So after bishop to d3, we get knight to c6, and we have castle from Aronian. After castle, we get knight to f6, just developing the knight, bishop to c2, and Vidit on move 7 spends 2 minutes and 47 seconds on the clock, and he plays bishop to g4. This is not a new move. There is one game in the database where bishop to g4 has been played, and it is indeed one of the best moves. However, given the fact that you are playing a rapid game, let's go back to this position after bishop to c2. The most common continuation, in my opinion, just looking at the board, should have been or could have been g6, get your bishop to g7, fianchetto your bishop on this long diagonal, and just castle. The reason is that you will most definitely see rook to e1, going for the semi-open e-file as your king is still in the center, and white will put a lot of pressure in the center. So I thought bishop, instead of spending the 2 minutes and 47 seconds in the opening theory, you can most definitely go for that move. And let's actually go ahead and check it out, how the game would have continued. So after bishop to c2, the straightforward idea could have been g6, you do indeed get rook to e1, going for the semi-open e-file. You have bishop to g7, bishop to a4, and castle. So bishop to a4, the idea of going after the c6 square, also getting your bishop on this nice diagonal. So after castle, you get d3, getting space to develop your knight and the bishop. So you get knight to d7. The idea behind knight to d7 is that you want to go ahead and get your knight to c5. You'll be putting pressure on the a4, as well as, you'll be putting pressure on a4 bishop, as well as the d3 pawn. And after that, you can then decide if you want to develop your bishop to, say, f4, and put a lot of pressure, especially on the pawn. So again, you will see a lot of the same principles, a lot of the same tactical ideas actually played out in the game. So how would this game have continued? After knight to d7, you get knight to d2, developing the knight, knight to c5, and now we just get bishop captures on c6, b captures on c6, and the game continues. Also, if you think about it, the reason why bishop to g4 fundamentally is going to be a slightly imprecise idea is because once you get bishop to a4, you have a lot of pressure on c6. So if you go ahead and capture the knight on f3, you get queen captures on f3, and now you have queen eyeing this diagonal as well. So you will be putting a lot of pressure on c6 and even the rook on a8. So most of the time you could throw a curveball, especially in a rapid game, but sometimes you should go with the simplest of ideas. But again, there's a reason why he is the second best chess player in India, and you and I are not. Well, unless you're Vishwanathan Anand watching this game, then you are number one. So yeah, after bishop to c2, we get bishop to g4, and there is one game in the database, like we said, and in that game, d3 was played, and white went on to lose the game very quickly. So instead, after bishop to g4, we do indeed get bishop to a4. And also, please note that given that Vidit spent 2 minutes and 47 seconds on move 7, the time difference right now is 24 minutes 22 seconds Levon and 22 minutes 29 seconds Vidit. So Levon is 2 minutes ahead on the clock. So after bishop to a4, we get knight to d7. Like we said, the same idea. You're going for that c5 square. You get h3, asking with it, hey, what do you want to do with that bishop? Do you want to go ahead and take it back to f4? Or do you want to go ahead and take it back to h5? Or do you want to go ahead and capture? Capturing would, of course, be a bad idea, like we have already said. So Vidit does indeed keep the bishop on the same diagonal and goes to bishop to h5. We get d3, making space for the knight as well as bishop to be developed. And after e3, we get e5. Vidit here spent, I believe, a little bit of time. I think he spent 1 minute 39 seconds. And after e5, so as of move 10, we have 22 minutes and 45 seconds for Levon and 20 minutes and 40 seconds for Vidit. So Levon is still up by 2 minutes. What could have been the other idea as well? You could certainly think about e6. You could think about queen to c7. After e6 or e5, you can just bring your bishop out and just castle. Like we said, this rook is coming. Why does this keep happening? This rook is coming to e1 and will be putting enough pressure on the e file. So okay, after e5, we do indeed get rook to e1 and bishop to e7. We have knight to d2, and here I believe somehow Levon spent 1 minute 39 seconds, most likely thinking either knight to d2 or a3. Both moves make a lot of sense, but after spending 1 minute 39 seconds, the time difference between the two is 9 seconds. So the time difference has been cut down literally instantaneously, just from move 10 to move 12. We have castle from black, and now knight to e4. After knight to e4, Vidit spends about 2 minutes and 25 seconds, and I'm sure some of the candidate moves here would be queen to c7. The other idea that would most likely work is bishop captures on f3. Now if you get queen captures on f3, this diagonal is blocked for the time being by white's own knight. So makes sense. You had to spend a couple of time just thinking about all the different permutations, but after this move, Vidit is down to 18 minutes and 34 seconds on the clock, and Levon has 20 minutes 28 seconds on the clock. So we're back to being favorable by 2 minutes for Levon. So you get queen to c7 from Vidit, and now a3. Here, I thought the best idea could have been just bringing knight to g3. Why do you want to play this right now? Well, you have two ideas. One is by playing knight to g3, you are attacking the undefended bishop, and the sneaky idea here could be you could capture on d4. And if black captures, you also have an undefended bishop on e7. So slightly imprecise move from Levon, but nothing too crazy. So, okay, we get a3 and now a5. After a5, the time difference between the two is by 2 minutes and 17 seconds. So Vidit is actually down by 2 minutes and 17 seconds. What could have been the other idea by after a3? Well, the most obvious idea, which is a slightly tricky line, it's more of an engine line. This is not something that you would see being played in a rapid game, and this is why knight to g3 would have been the best idea. And Vidit unfortunately doesn't punish him immediately. What's the idea? Well, let's check it out. So after f5, you get knight to g3, again going after the undefended bishop. But now you get bishop to f3. The reason why this works is because you played queen to c7. Queen captures on f3. e4, still going after the now going after the queen and just pushing your pawns. D captures on e4. F captures on e4. Queen captures on e4. And now knight to c5. You are attacking the undefended bishop and you are attacking the queen. Also note that after queen to e4 and knight to c5, there aren't a lot of squares for white queen. So, of course, you want to play queen to d5 with a check because you don't want to lose your bishop. You get king to h8, bishop captures on c6, b captures on c6, and look at all these squares. These are all the squares where the white queen cannot retreat to. The only square where the white queen can actually retreat is queen to h5. So your positional control, your center control is just truly amazing in this position. So again, this would have been just beautiful to watch. So queen goes to h5, but now you have queen to d3, and you're putting so much pressure on all of these squares, right? So this, I think this would have been truly amazing. And this is why sometimes in the, especially after you go from opening theory to the middle game, that's when you want to spend the most of your time. So after a3, the best continuation would have been f5, going after the knight. But you can't blame Vidit the fact that this is a lot to calculate, especially in a rapid game over the board. So a5 is most definitely the best idea. The idea behind a5 is that if you can get an outpost for, once this bishop moves, say you can get a4 in and you can get a nice outpost for your knight, that knight would be a monster knight. So whatever, that's fine. So after a5, the game continues with knight to g3, like we said. Just a one move later, but the same idea applies. You are attacking the undefended bishop, and your tactic is you're also attacking the undefended bishop. One is on h5, the other is on e7, and in this position, you'll most definitely at least win a pawn. So after knight to g3, sorry. Okay, so after knight to g3, we get bishop to g6, But now bishop captures on c6, b captures on c6, and now knight captures on d4. And Levon just instantly plays this move. It's a beautiful move. And again, the idea is if you get a capture, you'll go ahead and take the bishop. And that is indeed what happens. You get e captures on d5 and rook captures on e7. Let's go back. Here, Vidit actually spent 3 minutes and 45 seconds going for, 3 minutes and 42 seconds going for the capture. The idea is, well, let's check out what the other idea could have been. The other idea most definitely could have been knight to c5, going after the d3 pawn, as it is most definitely being attacked twice. You get knight to f5, just blocking the diagonal. You get rook to d8, d4, so you had 2 attackers still, and you only had 1 defender. So you get d4 attacking the knight, and now bishop to f8, bishop to g5, f6, attacking the bishop. Also, here, after bishop to f8, of course you can't capture because then you would just lose your queen. So I'm sure all of you just saw it. So you get f6, after bishop to g5, you get f6, bishop to e3, defending the pawn. But now you get e captures on d4, knight captures on d4, and queen to f7. Queen to f7 is actually a beautiful move. The reason behind that is that if you can get f5 and f4 in, you will actually fork 2 pieces. So after f5, white will most definitely have to play f4. The other idea is you can go ahead and capture the c4 pawn, and you'll be putting a lot of pressure on the d4 knight. So a lot of tactical advantages and a lot of positional advantages. So you could most definitely go down this line as well. The other idea after knight captures on d4 most definitely could have been rook to d8. As we have said, as we just saw, you'll be putting a lot of pressure on this, this d file. So, okay, after knight captures on d4, Vidit played e captures on d4, and now the time difference between the two is Levon has 19.5 minutes and Vidit has 13.5 minutes, and we're only 17 moves in. Like we said, the game between Fabi and Vidit in round 1, that one went 119 moves, and Vidit was essentially down to like 20 seconds. And he made an imprecise move towards the end of the game. So, okay, after e captures on d4, you do indeed get rook captures on e7, and now queen to d6. And queen to d6 is a beautiful move, right? You're attacking the rook, you're asking the rook to go back, and you're getting your queen on this beautiful diagonal. On this beautiful line, on this beautiful file, sorry. So yeah, after queen to d6, you get rook to e2. According to the engines, the most precise move would have been rook to e1, but it's not that huge of a difference. And Levon indeed spends about 3 minutes to calculate rook to e2 versus rook to e1. And now the time difference between the two, Levon has 16 minutes and 47 seconds, and Vidit has 13 minutes and 28 seconds. And Vidit does indeed go for knight to c5. You have knight to e4. And Vidit spends about 40 seconds and just captures with the knight. Feel free to pause the video. We're on move 19, and as you have already seen, the title of this video is Three Heartbreaks in One Game. Try to find why that's the first heartbreak of the game. So I'll give you a couple of seconds and see what the best continuation should have been from Vidit and why this is a blunder, slight blunder from Levon. Okay, so the move that you had to find was bishop captures on e4, d captures on e4, a4. The idea behind a4 is, like we said earlier in the game, if you can get your knight to b3, that would be a monster knight. Let's think about it from positional perspective. You are attacking this rook, you are attacking this bishop, you have absolute control of the d2 square as well. And on top of that, white sacrificed its light square bishop for a knight. So most likely, and again, you're protecting this pawn as well. So if this pawn becomes a runner, this knight will be an integral piece in getting you a queen. So this would have been such a beautiful move. So the game would have continued with bishop to d2, hoping to get on this diagonal. But after you play knight to b3, if white does indeed go for the b4 square, you can just push c5, and white has nothing, right? So after bishop to d2, you get knight to b3, and of course, there's no way you want to go ahead and waste a tempi in developing the bishop and then bringing the bishop back. So after knight to b3, most likely you would see rook to b1. And yeah, this would have been such a great positional advantage. White is in such a terrible position that it can't develop anything. Most likely, white will have to sacrifice its rook to just give up this, to get this monster knight. So Vidit does indeed deliver the first heartbreak on move 20 of this game. Yep. So stay tuned for the next two heartbreaks. So after knight to e4, Vidit plays knight captures on e4. You get d captures on e4. Rook to e8, getting your rook on this beautiful file. And now f3, just defending. Adding another defender. You get a4, and this is why it's so mind-boggling that you know that a4 move is coming and you have a total control of the b3. That knight would have been a monster knight right there. So Vidit saw this idea, and the fact that he captured with a knight on move 20 is slightly sad. But also there's a little story behind that. So in round one, when the game between Caruana and Vidit ended up in the end phase, the difference between the two players was that Fabiano had his bishop pair and Vidit had a bishop and a knight. So he had sacrificed his bishop pair for one of the knights. And you just saw that if Vidit had his bishop pair versus bishop pair, it would have most definitely been a draw. So I can see that psychologically speaking, you don't want to repeat the same error in this game going up against another super GM, especially a super GM like Levon Aronian. The another thing you have to consider is that this is a team event. It is not an individual event. So a lot of times in the team meetings, you will have preparation where the goal will be, hey, we're going to put you on board too. and you're going up against all of these super GMs. You're spotting them 140 elo points, 180 elo points. Just go ahead and get a draw, right? Don't blunder, don't go for the win. So psychologically, it is also tempting to play the safest move. And indeed, the safest move is knight captures on e4. So you have to consider all of these psychological and positional advantages and some of the preparation, not as an individual player, but also from the team's perspective. So after a4, we get c5. And Levon actually spent about 2 minutes, 24 seconds before he played c5. Now, Vidit is only down by 2 minutes and 16 seconds. So you had a 6-minute advantage. Now the 6-minute advantage is all the way down to 2.25 minutes. So that's very good. The move that you could have played after a4, and I'm pretty sure Levon quickly evaluated, is bishop to g5, trying to develop the bishop somehow, but you quickly get f6 and you just have to bring that bishop back, right? And you all can already see that bishop has no life, bishop has no squares on this diagonal because you will immediately get c5. So yeah, Levon actually goes for an active play, which is very, very admirable. So after a4, Levon goes with c5, queen captures on c5, and bishop to f4. So Levon said, hey, I'll give you your pawn back, but at least let me develop my bishop on this diagonal. So beautiful counterplay from Levon. And Vidit plays a beautiful prophylactic move here. Why is it a prophylactic move? Well, Levon wants to develop his rook as well. And the only square, the only file, the open file, semi-open file available is the C file. So by playing queen to b6, he's not letting white, Levon, develop his rook with a tempo. So beautiful prophylactic move. The only problem is that he spent 2 minutes and 16 seconds on this move, and now the time difference between the two is 14.5 minutes for Levon and 10 minutes for Vidit. What are some of the other candidate moves? Well, some of the other candidate moves you could potentially think of would be f5. You still get rook to c1 with a tempo. You get queen to b6. You want to keep this queen on this diagonal. So after queen to b6, you get e5. So, and the game continues. It's a very much a dry, drawn position. The other idea after bishop to f4, slightly exciting idea. If you are thinking about pushing d3 with a check, with a discovery, unfortunately, this does not work. So let's check it out why that doesn't work. So you get d3 with a check, and you're attacking the rook. You get rook to e3, just blocking any action. Bishop captures on e4, temporary bishop sacrifice. Rook to c1, queen to b6, king goes to h2. You have to get out of this ugly pin. You just have to, right? The reason why your rook wasn't able to capture is because you had this ugly pin and you don't want to capture with a pawn and get this rook developed right there, because then you will just have a lot of pressure going on the e file as well as this diagonal. So king to h2 is indeed the best move. You get bishop to d5, and this is a very, very good bishop. You get rook captures on e8, rook captures on e8, queen captures on d3, and now queen captures on b2. So just pawn exchange. The only problem is you gave up your monster pawn on d3 for a sad b2 pawn. But now rook to b1 and queen to f6. And the game continues here, right? You're going after the bishop. But d3 with a check does not work in this position. So Vidit does indeed calculate perfectly and plays an absolutely best move. So please note that right now we have 24 moves played, even though Vidit is down by 4.5 minutes on the clock. The fact that out of 24 moves, 23 moves that he played were either excellent or the best, right? And that matters a lot. The fact that he's able to calculate while Levon is the one who threw an absolute curveball, I believe, on move 2 as well as move 4. Props to you, sir. Props to you. So after queen to b6, we do indeed get rook to c1. You have c5, and that is going to be a very nice center for black. And you have rook to c4. Rook to c4 is actually a very good move. It is the best move recommended by the engine, but Aronian does spend about 1 minute 8 seconds before playing the move. And now he's down to, instead of 4.5 minutes, he's down to being up by 3.5 minutes. And f6. This is such a complex position, right? After rook to c4, the reason why it's a complex position is not only are you blocking any advances from the c5 pawn, but you're also attacking the a4 pawn. So some of the moves that you could potentially think of would be sacrifice your a4 pawn, but get your rook right there on the c file, or get your rook on the d file. So I can totally understand where Vidit spent about 1.5 minutes, I think 1 minute and 23 seconds before playing f6. But the idea is very active, which makes a lot of sense. And Levon actually blunders the game here and plays queen to c1. The best continuation after rook to c4 should have been rook captures on a4. And again, you can retreat with rook to c8 or rook to d8, or you can just go ahead and capture. In all three of them, it's an equalish position with white just want a free pawn, especially a pawn on a4. So now you can start pushing these pawns if the position simplifies. So you get rook captures on a4, queen captures on a4, and rook to d8, and the game continues. And this should have been the best continuation. But after rook to c4, Levon plays queen to c1. So let's see if Vidit finds the right idea. And indeed he does. He plays a rook to a5, defending the pawn, both pawns actually, one on c5 as well as a4. Now you get rook to c2, and Levon actually spent about 1 minute 25 seconds before playing potentially the only worst move possible, right? Like if you spend 1 minute 25 seconds, there are so many moves you can think about, right? Like you can think about queen back to d1, queen to e1, you can think about queen to f1, but rook to c2 is just an absolutely horrible move. And yeah. So let's check out one of the candidate moves, right? Let's say you get queen to d7, queen to d1, but now bishop to f1, just going after this diagonal, especially the rook. Now, of course, you can't capture the a4 pawn. The reason why you can't capture the a4 pawn is because bishop would come to b3, and you would attack the rook, and you would attack the queen. So the best continuation after bishop to f7 would be just to bring your rook back to c1. So you have now wasted three tempi, right? 1, 2, actually 4, 3, and 4. And you have allowed quite a bit of counterplay and quite a bit of positional advantage. So after rook to c1, you get rook to b5, and black would be completely dominating in this position. So the best continuation after rook to e5 would have been just bringing queen back. But instead, Aronian plays the absolute worst move possible. And let's see what happens. Vidit spends about 4 minutes on this move. And again, it's an extremely complex position. So it makes sense that he spends 4 minutes on this position. And the best move in this case would have been bishop to f7. We have already shown bishop to f7. And now you're forcing white to capture the pawn on c5. And I'm not going to go too deep in this position because I'm sure, as you can see from the thumbnail, we do indeed get to that point where rook captures on c5. So after bishop to f7, the only good continuation for white would be rook captures on c5, right? You can't go there. You can't retreat here because it'd be horrible. So, right, if you were to retreat there, you just get d3, you attack the rook, and you have a pin right there, and we'll see this. So Vidit does not find the most accurate idea after rook to c2. He does not find the most accurate idea. Instead, he goes for f5. f5 still works. It is not the worst move. It is black still has a lot of positional advantage, but bishop to f7 would have been absolutely forcing. So let's see what happens. You get rook captures on c5. Aronian is just hell-bent on going for the c file, and he's just digging his own grave. So what would have been a good continuation after f5? Well, really there aren't any, right? One of the continuations could be you get rook to f2, but now you get f captures on e4, f captures on e4, bishop captures on e4, rook to e2, and now queen to a6, right? You're attacking both rooks. And again, the game continues, but it is slightly better than rook captures on c5, and we'll quickly see why in a quick second. So the other idea after f5 could have been you just get out of this nasty diagonal, so king to h2, and this is something that you would have to spend so much time calculating, and time is very much a commodity in a rapid game. So you can't blame Levon for not playing king to h2. It is that's a very much either a classical game move or it's just an engine move. So after king to h2, you get f captures on e4, f captures on e4. We have already seen this. Bishop captures on e4, rook to e2, and queen to a6. So you end up in the same position. The only difference is your king is no longer on h2. The other idea you could think about after f5 is e captures on f5, right? Let's see what happens if you capture. You get bishop to f7, finally going for this diagonal. You have sacrificed the pawn, but you'll win that pawn back, so don't worry about that. Rook captures on c5, the only continuation for white. d3, rook to c3, rook captures on c5, rook captures on c5. Again, you're optimizing this pin beautifully. But now you get rook to c8. After rook to c8, you have to bring the bishop back. Bishop to e3, rook captures on c5, bishop captures on c5, and now d2. In d2, you absolutely have to capture the pawn on d2 and just give up your bishop. If you try to defend, right, say if you play queen to c2, then you get queen to d8, and after queen to c2, let's say if you bring your queen back, say queen to d1, now you get bishop to b3, and you're going to lose your queen. Well, either that or you're going to, or either that or black is getting another queen, right? So the continuation from here could be you get, say if you try to defend, you get queen to c2, you have queen to d8, and now you just have to bring this back, but now bishop to b3, and you don't have time to bring this, bishop back because your queen is hanging. So it's just an awful position. So after bishop captures on c5 and d2, you have to capture. So you get queen captures on d2 and bishop captures, right? Bishop captures with a check and the game would continue. So that would have been, you are down bishop, but you can most definitely go into this line. It is a lot better than how the game continued. So after f5, like we said, Levon is just hell-bent on going for that pawn and opening up the c file. So he plays rook captures on c5. However, Vidit delivers the second heartbreak of the game. And feel free to pause the video and see what the best continuation for black would be. So take a moment and see what the best continuation for black is. Okay, if you were paying attention, just 10 seconds ago, the best continuation is d3. The reason for that is you're attacking the rook, and this rook is already pinned, and you already have rook on a5 attacking rook on c5. So, and we have already seen this, right? You get d3, after d3, you get rook to c3, you get rook captures on c5, rook captures on c5, rook to c8, just adding a second attacker. You get bishop to e3, adding a second defender. You still get rook captures on c5. You get bishop captures on c5 and d2. Here you're not forced to capture, right? If you want, you could most definitely play queen to c2. And the reason why you can play queen to c2 is because this bishop is not on f7, right? So the way the game would continue is d2, queen to c2, but now you get, this is a very important move from black. D gets promoted to queen, the d2 pawn gets promoted to queen with a check, and now you get queen captures on d1, queen captures on c5 with a check, and the game continues. And again, this is just absolutely winning, especially for a player like Vidit. There is no way he would not convert this position being up an entire minor piece in the game. So unfortunately, after rook captures on c5, what is the second heartbreak? Vidit played rook captures on c5. And this is just a bad move. You went from being up, say, an entire minor piece, right? Completely dominating position, to being in an equalish, long, drawn out position. So the first heartbreak was on move 20th. The second heartbreak is on move 29th. Stay tuned for the third heartbreak. So after rook captures on c5, Levon plays rook captures on c5, and also note that after move 30th from Levon, Levon has 10 minutes on the clock and Vidit is down to 4.5 minutes. So the time difference between the two is 5.5 minutes. So a very nice cushion for Levon. You get f captures on e4, f captures on e4, and d3. Very strong move by Vidit. Bishop to e3, queen to e6, right? Just keeping an eye on this square, and now black is piling up on the e file. So you get rook to c7, And Levon actually spends 2 minutes just trying to calculate everything. And indeed, rook c7 is the best move. Now the time difference between the two is 3 minutes for Vidit and 7.5 minutes for Levon. So Levon doesn't have to worry about anything. He's still enjoying a 4.5 minutes of cushion between the two of them. You get queen captures on e4, bishop to d2, just blocking any advancements and just making sure that your pieces are nicely compact in this position. And Vidit spends about 1 minute and 24 seconds, so 1.5 minutes, and gets himself down to 3 minutes and 6 seconds to Levon, 7 minutes and 24 seconds. And he plays 8-6. What could have been the other candidate ideas? Well, the other ideas could most certainly be queen to d5, just centralizing the queen beautifully. You get bishop to c3, going for beautiful double action from the rook and the bishop. But now you get bishop to f7, just blocking the rook's influence on the g7 square. Queen to f4, rook to e2, rook to c8 with a check, bishop to e8. Of course, you can't capture because the rook is still protecting. Queen to f3, making sure that you're keeping an eye on the rook and also the bishop should you need to get involved. But now you get queen to d7, just getting the queen back, attacking the rook. Queen to a8, doubling up on the eighth rank, and now queen to f7. So the game could have continued something like this, but it's a dead drawn position unless someone blunders. What's the other idea after bishop to d2? Well, the other idea, the simple idea, is just blocking rook's influence on the 7th rank and just going for bishop to f7. Also, in some lines, if you can get your bishop to b3, you could be enjoying this diagonal, especially given the fact that this pawn is on the light square. So after bishop to f7, you get queen to c3, queen to d5, rook to c5, attacking the queen, and now queen just back to the 7th rank, queen to d7, rook to g5, going for some kingside action, but now bishop to g6. So again, like we said, you can just repeat the moves, but this would be a dead drawn position. But after bishop to d2, Vidit spent 1.5 minutes and played 8-6 and got himself down to 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Levon responded with queen to c5. You get bishop to f7, bishop to c3, and queen to g6. After this move, so we are on move 36. After move 36, Vidit is down to 2 minutes and 10 seconds to Levon's 6 minutes. So the time difference between the two is about 4 minutes. Levon spends about 2 minutes and 21 seconds, 2.5 minutes, and plays rook to e7, just trying to trick Vidit here. But Vidit just plays rook captures on e7. The other idea most definitely could just be you can get your king to 8-7, but Vidit is like, hey, let's go ahead and simplify the position and just go into a dead-end drawn game. So perfect play by Vidit. So after rook captures on e7, you get queen captures on e7, king to 8-7, queen to e5, bishop to e8, just normal drawn position. Trying to get king active in the game, but you're not going to be able to do it. The main problem is you have opposite square bishops, right? So you have king to f2, you have bishop to f7, g4, now bishop to b3. And even though you have these two connected pawns compared to Black's two isolated pawns, it is Black who's enjoying a more dominant position on the, I shouldn't say dominant, it's an equalish position. But if you just took a snapshot of the queen side, I would slightly prefer to to be black rather than white. And also, like we said, right, from team's concept perspective, you're playing the black pieces and you're playing some of those super GMs, spotting them 140, 180 low points. So it makes perfect sense from Vidit that, hey, if I can just get a draw in this game, the team wins. So bishop to b3, you get king to e3, bishop to c2, king to d2, bishop to b3, king to e3, bishop to c2. Vidit is glad to just take a draw here. Bishop to d2, I'm sorry, king to d2, bishop to b3, and Levon still doesn't want to draw, and he throws a curveball, and he goes for queen to e7. And Vidit plays bishop to c2. Again, he thinks that this is just a normal move. So feel free to pause the video one last time, or maybe there will be one more time. So feel free to pause the video, penultimate time, and find the best idea for Levon, and why this could be potentially the third heartbreak of the game. Okay, so also a key thing to note, Vidit has 1.5 minutes on the clock to Levon's 3.5 minutes on the clock. And Vidit just plays an absolute head scratcher with bishop to c2. And the reason why it's an absolute head scratcher and the move that you had to find was bishop to e4. And this is just completely winning, but you're thinking that, hey, I don't need to allow this pawn to run wild. Well, you are correct. So Vidit indeed plays a captures on b3 en passant, and feel free to pause the video potentially one more time. Feel free to pause the video and find the best move for Levon and find the winning idea here. Okay, so after a captures on b3 en passant, if you found bishop to b2, congratulations, you have just helped Levon win an absolute brilliant game. And this is such an amazing, amazing move from Levon. Why is that an amazing move? Well, bishop can't go anywhere. It's essentially being treated like a pawn, but it's worse than a pawn. The reason why it's worse than a pawn is because at least you can advance the pawn and you can get a queen, you can sacrifice a queen, and you can do something with it. But in this position, these pawns can't advance. You can't do anything with the bishop. And oh, you have this nasty threat right there. So you can't even move your queen. So black is just in an absolute zugzwang where you don't have any moves. And on top of that, what can white do? Well, white has this runner. So you can easily just play a4, a5, a6, a7, a8. And there's just no stopping that pawn. So Vidit plays h5 with 7 seconds left on the clock. And as a true, if you have seen Bollywood movies, the typical ending of a Bollywood movie is that the protagonist, the hero, is just getting absolutely crushed, and somehow he throws a last haymaker. I mean, this happens in all movies, I suppose. It doesn't have to be a Bollywood movie. And somehow he goes on to win in the movie. He goes on to defeat the opponent, defeat the villain. Though I suppose Levon is very much not a villain in this scenario. Just poor example by me. But find out why. What was the idea for Vidit? Why was this such a last haymaker? And what is the idea that Vidit had in mind? So I promise you, feel free to pause the video one last time and see what poison or what last minute heroic effort Vidit had in mind. Okay, so for those of you that found that G captures on h5 absolutely loses the game for Levon, congratulations. So why does that lose the game? Well, you get G captures on h5, queen to g2 with a check, and now it really doesn't matter whether you block with a queen and try to sacrifice your queen or you just run away, because the main idea is that you have freed up this pawn. And indeed, by freeing up the pawn, you have freed up the bishop. So let's just see one of the continuations. And by the way, regardless of what you play, even with the most perfect continuation, you get, I think, a mate in whatever 13 or 17. So let's say you play queen to e2, just block the diagonal and just block the check and say, hey, look, I don't want any problems. You can go back with your queen and just continue the game. But now you get d captures on e2, an important move. Bishop to d4, queen to f1. Again, I'm showing you the most perfect play, right? So you will see sacrifices and some of the dumb moves. Bishop to f2, queen captures on f2, king to c3. But now you get a queen, and that comes with a check. King to c4, queen to e5, king to b4, and of course you can all see it, queen to d4 with a checkmate. So again, even with the most perfect play, after queen to g2 with a check, well, let's see if king runs to e3. That's not any better. So you still get queen to e2 with a check, you get king to f4, queen to e7, queen captures on e7, you just captured the queen, bishop to c1, d2, bishop captures on d2, b2, king to g3, but now you get queen b2 to b1, you're promoting the queen, king to h2, queen to f1. Again, I'm showing you the most perfect play from white, right? So that's why you saw the bishop sacrifice, you saw the queen sacrifice, bishop to c1, queen to f2 with a check, king to h1, and now finally bishop to e4 with a checkmate. So in this position, I'm not even going to show if king goes to c3 because it's just a quicker checkmate. So that's the idea that Vidit had in mind after h5. He thought he could be the Tony Stark and he could just go for the last heroic move before he ends this game and goes on a winning idea. But of course, Levon just calmly played g5 and all the hopes were crushed. So Vidit still tried and he said, okay, fine, I'll push h4. But now you just get a4. This pawn is just quickly advancing and there's nothing you can do about it. You get king to g8, a5, king to h7, a6, and now Vidit tries to sacrifice the bishop and says, hey, let me see if I have any other counterplay. But you get king captures on d1, d2, and now Levon has had enough. He's like, look, I'm just completely winning this. There's no way you can stop me. So let me just go ahead and sacrifice my queen. I'll get another queen and the game is just over. So you get queen captures on g7, bishop captures on g7, king captures on g7, and king captures on d2. And it is as of move 56 that Vidit Gujrathi resigned the game. Why did he resign the game? You can all see it. a7, a8. This pawn is not fast enough because you can just go ahead and gobble it up. And there's no way you're going to be able to capture both of the pawns because once you get the queen in the game, there's nothing. You don't have any counterplay. So that's all the time we have for today. And I hope we were able to do the Socratic justice. And also, I'm sure you noticed that out of 56 moves, Vidit probably played 51 or 52 best or excellent moves. He played 3 moves imprecisely, move 20th, move 29th, and the other move with the bishop. I believe that was on move 46. And then I believe he played one move where he could have gone for the more perfect idea, but again, you wouldn't expect any player, let alone especially someone who's playing in a team tournament with black pieces, to go for an aggressive counter-attacking idea. So out of 56 moves when the game ended, 51 moves were played literally perfectly. There were 3 blunders, and one move was a questionable move. So we hope we were able to do the Socratic justice, the necessary justice to both Levon and Vidit, and just show you some of the complexities behind this position. And if you were someone who saw some of the other YouTube videos and you were like, hey, look, he just got dominated and he just got outclassed, that is not what happened. So if you are one of the mean-spirited critics, as the online platform very much allows you to do that behind a computer screen and just do it so effortlessly, I suppose, we hope we provided some feedback, some guidance to you. And to Vidit, to Samay Raina, you guys are doing an excellent job, especially to Vidit. You are 25 years old, brother. You are 3 years younger than me. And if you can continue to play for the next 25 years, represent the India in the same amazing, beautiful manner that someone like Vishwanathan Anand has done, we will most certainly feel proud. So please, 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 um, like, subscribe, comment on this video, share the video with as many people as possible. Also, if you haven't seen our analysis from the same tournament between Vishwanathan Anand and Yanni Pomnichi, the great Nepo himself, please do check it out. That game is a must watch. Vishy made the Super GM. I believe Nepo is ranked 4th in the world. Vishy made the 4th best player in the world on this planet Earth resign in 17 moves. That video is a must watch. So I'll put a link in the description box below, also towards the end of the video, so you can check it out. So thank you very much once again. And if you want to be a part of our COVID-19 relief effort, there is a donation link in the box in the description box below. There's a PayPal link as well as the Venmo ID. And if you are going through a financial hardship or anything, we completely understand. If you just want to simply like, comment, and subscribe and share the video with as many people as possible, just help us grow, that will be enough. And whatever money we make, it will go 100% towards the COVID-19 relief efforts for at least the entire series. So thank you very much once again. Hope you guys have a good night, and please stay tuned for our round 8 coverage between the same 2 players, Vidit Gujrathi and Levon Aronian, and see if Vidit can bounce back, if he did bounce back in the round 8, where we'll provide another in-depth analysis of a beautiful game that was played. Thank you very much. Hope you guys have a good night.